guests on the dais, all wonderful leaders in their own right, having proven the mettle that they have proven. So we couldn't have been really more lucky than today we have to understand the challenges and the complexities that lie within managing state. As Paul Krugman famously said in one of his most celebrated essays, a country is not a corporation. So that being the case, I'll start my question with all of them. In fact, request all the guest dignitaries today to shed light on what exactly are the strengths that they need to have, what are the challenges that they face, because they deal with the crisis of the state, which is far different from probably the crisis of the company, where we look at the balance sheet and where the shareholders' profit maximization is the only thing that drives, but here the stakeholders are too many. That being the theme of today's conversation, I would start with Shri Ravi Shankar Shukla about his thoughts, because he has been here in this city and this district, and now he is in a district managing, an adjacent district managing the challenges that effectively he has been managing. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us here. So, to put very simply, one of the biggest challenge for us is that we don't know what's going to be the next challenge. So, it's almost like we are firefighting in most of the situations, and there is very little time to consolidate upon what we have been doing or what we have been thinking to do. And very often we are caught running and passing the baton without preparing the next generation adequately for the challenges that they are going to face or witness. But apart from that, in general terms, yes, like we see that the bureaucracy in India, it has done some incredible work in addressing some of the mission mode problems or some of the problems which are addressed as a team, and when we are not doing with anything else, for example, conduct of elections, or if you remember during the COVID-19 period, even a country like US struggled a lot in providing monetary support through digital transactions to its citizens, but it was done very easily and very seamlessly in a country like ours. Similarly, management of disaster, even one of the most cost-effective moon landing projects which were done in our country. But at the same time, there are issues of quotidian nature which we tend to face on a day-to-day basis. We still have more than 10 million students who can't read and write properly. We still have more than 70% of the population who are making out-of-pocket expenditure on their health concerns. So these are some of the challenges, basically in terms of improving the quality of life and providing the kind of public service which we should have been providing. In general terms, I will say yes, these are the challenges which we face on a regular basis and which concern us a lot.
Thank you, sir. Now, of course, to our very own Honorable Deputy Commissioner, Sri Ananya Mittal. Sir, what about your thought when it comes to the challenges that you've been facing when it comes to implementing some wonderful policy plans on ground?
So, I definitely agree with Sir about his views, the challenges about the challenges we face. But there are other issues also, like we can call government the largest organization probably in the country, and just like any other organization, there is manpower to be managed, and just by the virtue of being the largest company or the largest organization, we also have the largest manpower recruited, and manpower management is also one of the major challenges we face. There are too many tasks to be implemented and too less time to ponder upon them. So to cater the largest clientele, if I talk in management terms, we have less time to plan and more to implement in terms of expanse also and in terms of number of tasks also. So those are some of the challenges which we face on daily basis. I also think that while leading or while working in any organization, we need to be emotionally really intelligent. There are issues which we face on daily basis which hamper our emotional intelligence quotients also, and that is also one of the tasks which comes to my mind, which we have on daily basis in our area. And I would definitely say that just as sir said, that when there are too many tasks, too less time, and then many of the tasks are of emergent natures, urgent natures. So to manage those tasks one by one, and before finishing the first task you get to see the other without knowing from where it is coming. These are some of the challenges, I think, which are very important for us and very problematic for us to manage the country or the district.
Thank you, sir. My next question, the same question to probably all three of our honorable guests, starting with you, Dipankar Choudhary, and of course, Satabdi Mazumdar ma'am, you also have to take the same question, of course, to you also. The question being, because relatively you've been, as a state executive, state leaders, you've been rather young in terms of your entry into it. So how has it been in terms of your experience being in this service and your challenges and your learning that you would like to share with our students?
Thank you very much. I think Ravi sir and Ananya sir have elaborated very well on the challenges we faced. My experience so far has been very exhilarating. So there are different streams in which once you enter the service you work. There is one stream which deals with regulatory functions. That can be law and order, licensing authorities, public management, all of that things. So initially you get to work on that, and then there is another component, another stream where you work, which is known as the development stream. So that would include implementing government schemes, implementing government policies, all the infrastructure work we do, maintaining that infrastructure, human development in terms of education, nutrition, health, everything else. And then once you are senior enough, once you become a deputy commissioner, you deal with all of them combined together at once. So as an SDM, you are dealing with law and order and regulatory functions, then you get a chance to deal with development functions, then you deal with all of them at once. And the biggest challenge I think which civil servants face is stakeholder management. Because frankly, even if I start counting, I cannot list on all the stakeholders we deal with. There is just to compare and contrast, say if in a private organization you are dealing with your CEO who reports to the board of directors, who in turn is responsible to the shareholders of that company. Here you probably have media, you have the judiciary, you have a group of people known as RTI activists, you have your own seniors, you have politicians, you have people in general, everyone around you. Even when it comes to political circles, it's not just the elected representatives themselves, but a whole cohort of people who walk around with them, each having their own incentives, their own agendas. I think I listed media, and then lawyers are there, various organizations, pressure groups, NGOs, all of them are there. So the stakeholders are so many, and they intersect at so many points. Each one is crisscrossing the other at too many junctions. So at times you feel lost as to the step you are going to take is going to antagonize some or the other stakeholder in the near future or down the line. And you possibly try and manage that when that particular stakeholder gets antagonized, it does not fall upon you. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges, managing all the stakeholders we have. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Before you start, yes.
I hope you are not referring to seniors like me and Ananya as challenges.
So there are stakeholders who are your support system also, to help you manage all the other stakeholders. So I'll put you and Ananya sir in that category.
This is also a challenge, how not to say what you want to say.
Good evening, everyone. I completely agree with my previous esteemed panelists. The main challenge which I feel, there are many outrightly, But to select one big challenge, I feel that I make a long to-do list each night before I go to bed. But the next morning when I wake up, the entire to-do list goes out for a toss, and I'm given like another 5 tasks which are equally or more important. Now how do I prioritize? That is the biggest challenge. As an SDM posted here in Jamshedpur, law and order is the first and foremost thing for me. But there are emergent problems, like there might be a fire outbreak, there might be a very urgent inspection that is to be done. So firefighting, navigating between the problems, between the issues that have come up, and managing each and every stakeholder, I believe is the biggest challenge.
Thank you. Over to you, Sri Aniket Sachan. ADM as ADM Law and Order. Probably your challenge would be a little different.
No, actually, as far as the post is concerned, the SDM and ADM Law and Order's work is similar. But however, we also deal with developmental challenges at the same time. However, I won't repeat what the esteemed panelists before me have they have said, and I completely agree with it. What I again feel at the larger level, that as India, our nation as a polity, as a democratic polity, it has actually taken up too many tasks at the level of development that it currently is in. So, and the thing that differentiates running a country from corporate again is that you don't get to choose what exactly or how much exactly you want to deliver or produce. So the demand comes from the public who have put and some of them to rule over them, and we are just an executive arm that belongs to them. So at the level of development that we are in, the sheer amount of tasks that Satabdi and Dipankar and Ananya sir and Ravi sir also highlighted, so that can get out of hand. That is the reason. And just to rephrase what Ravi sir said already, I personally feel that running the government is like running a project with lot of force majeures happening. They just keep happening. So even if you have the best of the planning, you have best of the ideas to get things to work, you have best of the manpower. Even if you get the best of the manpower, there are just few things, because there are so much. It's a general system. There isn't a single equilibrium that is existing at any point of time. So things will keep happening, and as Satabdi said, the entire total list goes out for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Probably what I would request now the honorable panelists to do the following. Rather than waiting for the questions, so you please pick up the tab and start, because I know you are the two senior most executives, so probably your experience will be more. But my question will be in the area of crisis management. One is crisis management that you do a lot on a daily basis, and of course both of you have tremendously done. I'm sure the rest of our panelists have done as well. The crisis management. The second is, which is a little nuanced, without bordering on the political. Probably you can refuse to answer that question. How do you? I'm not using any political balance. How do you deal with disgruntled elements of the society, which there are far too many, and you have to deal with it because you are on ground. You are the commanders on ground. And what is your strategy? Because it's all about, for us, business management is all about strategy. Do you develop strategy? What kind of strategy? And how do they help you deal with those disgruntled elements of society? And of course, crisis management. What strategy do we have up your sleeves, if at all any? You can probably, Ravi sir, you can probably take the tab. And
it depends upon the kind of crisis that we are dealing with. For example, it may be a crisis related to public health. For example, the one that we faced during COVID-19. So in COVID-19, the crisis management required an urgency to anticipate. Generally, it is understood that bureaucracy or administration as such is risk averse, and there is lack of initiative on account of a fear of failure. So mitigating such crisis would require an anticipation of the problem, being ready to fail and to associate with as many stakeholders as there may be. For example, I remember, and this is an association which is related with the XLRI, this institution itself. So I fondly remember it, and I can also mention it. that when Professor Girdhar was here, we partnered with digital intervention to map all those people who were coming and to provide them both counseling as well as to offer the kind of support which was required to be provided by the administration. So that was a partnership of civil society, research institutes as well as the administration. So, I mean, yes, again, there will be different kind of crisis management when you are dealing with law and order management, where you may be required to take sometimes counter-majoritarian approach and to uphold the moral attitude of the institution that you are representing, to uphold the constitutional values. So there are so many situations of crisis that I mean, it won't be unidimensional approach, and that is where again being connected to the values of the society, to the fabric of the nation, and the easiest way for someone like us, since I have a like educational background in law, so the easiest way that I find is to connect it with the mandate of the Constitution. That's how I have been trying to do it. Over to Vinay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So, any crisis or any task, when it is to be managed, there are 3 or 4 things which I try to follow. Like, first is to give time to the issue. It's very important to understand the issue well and not act hastily. It is very important to understand that if you are unaware about the issue and trying to resolve it, there are people around you who will try to confuse you about it. So it is very important to give time to the problem you are facing. It is also important to discuss it with your team. Obviously, by team I mean people on whom you can rely. So you have to choose your team, choose the people around you, and discuss it with them to understand the conventionality and also the rules and laws which are surrounding the issue. Then it is also important to discuss it with the stakeholders. You have to involve all, understand how your action will affect each stakeholder. And once probably these things are done, in our set of organization, you have to keep every, probably your seniors, the politicians, you have to keep them in loop. That this is what you are thinking. So any kind of crisis or any kind of task is generally managed by these 4 or 5 things. I mostly practice this, and also there are some tasks which I am not able to manage, but these are some of the crisis management ideas which I follow.
Thank you. Over to you. Yes.
Thank you, Ravi sir. Thank you, Ananya sir. I'll take the more politically loaded part of the question, is that how you deal with disgruntled elements. And the simple 2-word answer is emotional intelligence, but I would rather illustrate it through an example which happened during my previous posting. So I don't know if you have heard of a place called Devghar in Jharkhand. And during the month of Sawan, we have huge swaths of people coming there to offer their prayers. So on a typical Monday, you will have a crowd of about 2 to 2.5 lakh people waiting to enter the temple to offer their prayers. So what happened was that normally what happens is that during the on Sunday afternoon, the temple gates are closed, and the deity goes to sleep. And the deity is supposed to sleep for a certain amount of time before the deity can be woken up again on a Monday morning, and the rituals can be started again. And there's also a bali which happens on some Sundays, but for some reason that could not be done on time. And the deity supposedly didn't have enough time to sleep. So next morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, when the temple gates were supposed to be opened, and there was a huge queue of about 2 lakh people. The queue was of almost 6 kilometers long, waiting to enter the temple. I was there at the temple gate, and I was told that the gates will not be open because the temple priest had decided that the deity did not get enough sleep and the last night bali or animal sacrifice didn't happen. So another 3 hours before the temple gates can be opened. And there have been previous incidents of stampede there. There have been previous incidents where very senior officers have been physically manhandled inside the temple premises. And I was supposed to take a call as to how I get the temple doors opened. Now at such moments, I mean, you have all the powers of CRPC. You can authorize use of force, and every word which comes out of your mouth is either going to calm down the nerves of the people who are agitating, or it's going to further agitate them even more. So, in terms of disgruntled elements, we got the temple gates opened. We made the animal sacrifice also happen in time. In terms of managing disgruntled elements, at the moment, whatever you say, whatever words you speak, how you interpret their body language, how they interpret your body language, whether you are standing with stooped shoulders or whether you are standing with broadened shoulders, or whether you are saying in a low husky voice or in a broad baritone, everything matters as to how you convey your presence to the people and whether or not they are convinced by what you are about to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to you, ma'am. Satabdi.
Sure. Thank you, my esteemed panelists. In the context of crisis management, I have two small points to make. In a case of crisis, first, I believe planning for should rather be transformed to planning with. What I mean to say is, rather than planning for, involve the stakeholders themselves who are in the crisis. And by planning with them, we will better understand the crisis and will be able to deliver better to the stakeholders. That is first. Second, one thumb rule in administration with in the context of crisis management is whenever there is a crisis, try to reach the spot immediately, either you yourself or the next in line. So I think these 2 points, planning for to planning with, and second, reaching the crisis situation, reaching the crisis spot on time, immediately, as soon as possible, I think these two will work well. Second part of the question, talking about disgruntled elements in general and not disgruntled political elements. From a general perspective, I'll share a small anecdote with you. I was the president mess committee in the academy, and serving a lot of 480 plus OTs, officer trainees, was a big deal of headache. But when I started being responsive, when I started listening to their problems, mess के problems हर जगह same ही होते हैं. I'm sure you will be able to relate. No mess manager can make the entire crowd happy. It is next to impossible. And they are the most thankless lot. They'll work entire day, but no one is going to thank you. But the moment you start responding to their problems, listening to their complaints day in, day out without scolding them back, I think half the problem will be solved. So dealing with disgruntled elements, I guess being polite in your behavior, watching your words very carefully and responding on time, immediately and as soon as you can, will work well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Being a teacher of management communication, I couldn't really resonate more with that. Thank you. Over to you, Aniket Sachan.
So, thank you to all panelists that spoke before me. What I particularly feel about crisis management in government is that crisis actually forces the government to form an institution. First the crisis comes, and in most cases, then thereafter the planning for it comes. Because most of the crises that keep happening are once in a century or once in a decade, or something that wasn't present the time when whenever the government was working. So for example, I would just like to highlight, the country didn't have any systematic system for disaster management till 1998. And the proper formalization, in 1998 there was a cyclone in Odisha that killed almost 10,000 people. Millions of houses were destroyed in it. Lot of lives, as I said, 10,000 people lives were lost in it. And many families were destroyed in it. And thereafter it formed an SOG, a special group for managing the disaster that come time to time to Odisha. and that actually became a template for future disaster management act that came in 2006. So in general, as you perceive, many of you might be perceiving of the government is mostly resistant to change. The thing with corporation is that if a corporation doesn't perform, it's simple, its assets are just sold off, and they become more productive whenever the next corporation takes it over. Well, that is the assumption that goes with the general corporate world. However, in government, that is not an option, because people's lives are hanging on thread with each of the failures that government faces, or any crisis that for which government hasn't planned comes. For example, in most of the states, building regulations are not very prominently enforced, and that sometimes results to disasters that are unforeseen. But as Satabdi said, that we have to plan, we have to act as the crisis is ongoing or it is in the make, and that is what I think sets the expectation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next question, of course, pertains to what bureaucratic leadership is defined as. It's all about fairness, consistency, and most importantly, the two grey areas is managing change, the resistance to change, and of course, the wheel of development turning slow. Because the two areas probably have been literally been challenging, staring in your face. As leaders in your individual right, what have been your strategies in place when it comes to managing change, or rather resistance to change, which have been dime a dozen, I'm sure. And of course, the second one is how to ensure that the wheels of development don't turn slow. Okay, yes, over to you. Yes, please, probably. It's not about change. And
No, sure.
forgive me, sorry. As my students, when I'm looking at them, when they will be joining organizations as management trainees, they'll also be probably grappling with this challenge. So they'll probably have some insights from your experience, collective experience.
So as far as the slow pace of development is concerned, as you highlighted, there is a lot of dissatisfaction among most of the citizenry of our country with the pace of development that is happening. What I particularly feel is, what I have been my learning in regard to this, the first learning that I have learned is that you can't give development until it is demanded. Wherever we have, not me per se, whenever the government machinery has attempted to give development to people without any inherent demand from the side of the people, that initiative has failed most of the time. Maybe there might be 20-30% of the initiatives that might have succeeded. One good fortunate exception to that is Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. In that case, a behavioral change came about as the initiative was launched. Initially, there was not much demand for the toilets, but as you have seen, today, at least most of the people, they realize the health benefits, the hygiene benefits of the toilets that everyone should have. The second learning, again, as regard to the slow pace of development is the difference between the aspirations that people have and what we think constitutes as development. So it is possible that a person who lives in a village, he might be thinking the best development that I can get is maybe having a pakka road to my house and a drain that takes out water from that place to somewhere else. So that is the best development that he can have per se. But as a policy administrator, you have to think what consequences the development that he is asking for has for the people who are around it. So it is possible that the road you build, it might be on the flow of the water, and you are just transferring the problem from one section to the other. That you might be saving his home from getting flooded during rainwater due to that rain, but the problem just gets transferred to the next house. So during the developmental process itself gets slowed because we have to figure out these contradictions that keep happening between the differing developmental perceptions that people have, and you have to ultimately take a community view that sometimes even doesn't coincide with the view that community had for itself. So I think.
So sticking to the spirit of probably what Ravi sir said, we'll go over to you, ma'am, Satabdi ma'am, and we'll come back to Dipankar Choudhary, then we'll come over to you.
I'll answer the questions point-wise. First and foremost, how to manage change. I believe the best way to manage change is first clear-cut communication about the change itself. And second, when the communication is loud and clear, we have to collaborate, plan, and move forward for the execution. So 2 points, communicate and collaborate. That is for managing change. Coming to the how to ensure the wheels of development does not turn slow. I would take it up at a micro level and macro level. Talking about the micro level, I feel at a small office setup or so, to ensure that the change, the developmental process is consistent and not slow, we should review things periodically. What gets reviewed gets done. That is one very important thumb rule in administration. Second, at a macro level, we have to identify what is the precursor of that development. For instance, if we are talking about infrastructure development, the most important precursor, at least in the context of Jharkhand, would be land issues. The SPT Act, the CNT Act, the lack of land surveys, putting it differently, the surveys could not be completed yet. So focusing on the precursor of development would solve half the problem. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Satabdi. I think Satabdi has hit the nail right on the spot. Communication is the key. I don't know if you people have heard of a person called Chester Bernard. He was a very famous public administration scholar, and he has also said that communication is the most important key in any organization. When it comes to managing change, I think other than communication, the other important thing is that you place systems in place in the organization. I still find myself struggling to do that. I join a new office and I see that systems are not in place. How files are to be compiled, how movement has to be done, how records have to be stored, and once you want to institutionalize something, there is no job which is too small for you. You go, start from the basics, you teach each and everyone in your organization that this is how this work is supposed to be done. You do it if you can and you show it to them, and then you keep course correcting. The second question was about resistance to change. Again, one of the most important, some of you might find this too extreme, but one of the most important ways I have found to deal with resistance to change is to stop giving people options. So again, taking from Satabdi's example, land records. If you have both, you say you want to digitize all records, you say you want to digitize all land revenue processes, all revenue codes processes. You do that, and then you stop the option for doing anything in a non-digitized form, anything in a pen and paper mode. As long as both the options are available, people will choose the former instead of the latter. So what we normally feel is that if suddenly we say that no physical movement of files from now on, everything has to be done digitally, the system will be in enormous strain. Parts of the system will stop functioning, they will crumble. But if you can get through that difficult phase, then the system will be institutionalized. Once you keep giving people options, alright, I know you are not used to digital platforms as of now, so let's keep the option open. You can do it in the physical format and you can do it in the digital format. Even if you do it in that digital format, try and keep a physical copy for it. Once you dilly-dally, you step your foot in both the boats, there will be resistance to change. You decide on a policy and then you cut out all other alternatives. This has to be done and it has to be done in this way. People will gradually evolve and learn to do it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. It's over to our very own Deputy Commissioner, Shri Ananya Mittal.
So I actually don't have anything to add in this because they've really given very crisp and clear answers, and I definitely think that communication is the key to keep things in line and systematize things, collaborate, review. These are the basic points which I also follow, and these are the only points I think which are important for this. Thank you.
Shri Shukla. Yes, sir.
Well, I will just refer to Taleb. I hope you guys must have started reading or hearing about Taleb. Yeah, so there are many books. So Taleb keeps referring to Greek aphorisms, and some of his works would be referring to one person by the name Heraclitus. So Heraclitus says that we never stand in the same water twice. So change is the only thing that is constant in life. But again, means how to cope up with it? How, as Satabdi told, be prepared for it, accept it, and work for change in a way that it is sustainable. Because mere change without consolidating anything would be a movement from nothing to nothing. So that is where we change, and at the same time we try to consolidate the gains from those changes in incremental manner. So that is very important.
Staying with you, sir, because you all have been incarnated in this state, Jharkhand, as officers of Jharkhand cadre. There's one particular question which comes to my mind as a teacher is what kind of a tightrope walking, if at all you do, which I'm sure you do, when it comes to balancing, let's say, the growth, the development, economic development of the society that you're serving, and also ensuring that the rights are preserved, which is very important. We talked about constitution anyway.
So, well, I will give a bit of context. Like there are two views. One is by Jagdish Bhagwati and Arvind Panagaria and others, which is built upon the theory that economic growth matters a lot. For example, the state should invest more in infrastructure. And the second one is by John Reyes and Amartya Sen about investing in human capital, investing in quality of life is more important. But then there is another group of thoughts. Professor Karthik Muralidharan, our very own cabinet secretary, one of the most capable bureaucrats that the country has ever had, T.V.S. Somnathan sir. They have written books, State Capability in India and book on accelerating growth in India. More than speaking about economic growth or quality of life, it is important to see the quality of expenditure that we are making either on economic growth or on quality of life or on human capability development. That is more important, because at the moment where we are losing is mostly because the quality of investment is not that good. Means like people tend to say that corruption is a menace, and that is definitely a menace, but there is a study which suggests that we lose only 17% due to corruption and 83% due to inefficiency. So that I will say would be more important. How do we address these things? Because ultimately, through the route of economic growth or through the route of human capability development, the end purpose is almost similar. Both will contribute to the same loop of demand and supply.
Thank you, sir. Over to Sri Ananya Mittal, sir. Yeah, it probably, sir.
Just one line, like sir, to summarize. Right gets protected when there is development. So there can be no protection for rights without it was what it.
Absolutely true. I agree with Sir and Aniket. So, in terms of growth, when we are taking it as growth without taking or without any democratic process, like without understanding what people need, and then we are indulging or doing some growth, then probably the rights are not served. So the whole process of growth in India comes from the democratic process, like the Gram Sabha decides, or there are people who are elected, they decide, and then things are converted into developmental projects. So they definitely translate into rights being served. But I understand that in the planning process, or probably in a process in which popularism is taking front seat, this is an issue, and as bureaucrats, this is an important role which we have to serve in order to keep it from keep it bottoms up approach, bottom to up, and then only probably we'll be able to protect rights.
Over to you, Shri Choudhary.
Thank you very much. In my mind, when it comes to right versus economic growth, the priority is very straight. Rights are more important than economic growth. Ravi sir was talking about Amartya Sen and his capability approach. I remember reading in a newspaper article written by Amartya Sen himself that the difference between the road story of India and China can be explained in terms of this analogy. China is a BMW car going at very high speed, and it has no brakes. So all of a sudden, if there is a bump, if there is a big speed breaker or a ditch, the entire bumper, the axle, everything can collapse and break down. India is a 50-year-old Thar model. It goes a kilometer, something fails, it is repaired, and then it again goes a kilometer. Much slower, because we are trying to find ways to do inclusive growth. We are trying to enhance the capabilities of people, as Amartya Sen would have put it. Goes on a much slower speed, but nevertheless it reaches the destination and it reaches safely. No chances of accident, no one is going to die. The system will roll at its pace and take you safely. You know, they keep writing those slogans on the roadside. Durghatna se der bhari. So it will take you daily say, but there will probably be no big accidents as China. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Over to you, Satabdi ma'am.
Sure. So I personally don't see it as a either or versus model. I see it going hand in hand. Economic development and rights being preserved both goes hand in hand. And as a student of anthropology and public administration, I emphasize a lot on the participatory rural uprising. So the stakeholders have to be involved in the process of economic development, only then their rights will be preserved and it will be a sustainable development process. That is very clear. For instance, अगर कोई mud houses बन रहा है, why can't the locals be involved in creating that and maintaining that? It is as simple as that. So I see it going hand in hand. Thank you.
Shri Aniket Sachan, last word.
So, just to elaborate the point that I earlier made. So, specifically as you asked the question, it was in context of Jharkhand. So, what I feel that specifically in Jharkhand, the baseline of development is so low that any investment that you make towards development, that automatically translates into production of some or other right. For example, if you are making some road, then it automatically translates to better access to healthcare or education. Or if you are just doing some water supply scheme, you are taking up some water supply scheme, it might be happening on some other guy's land, but it automatically gets translated into good access to water. The problem arises when the benefits are concentrated, but the costs are diffused. So that is what we have to take care of, because ultimately the rights, the thing with rights automatically gets translated into having diffused benefits, and that is what development is about as well. So that is the part.
Thank you. So much as I have a slew of questions that I look forward to throwing at you, I would invite my students to ask question. And please ask your question. I'm sure all of you will have, some of you will have. Ask the question and mention who the question is directed at, so that he or she can pick it up and answer. Over to you. Yes, only students, not you. They're all students end of the day, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, audience. Yes, Mulli out there. Mulli.
Sir, my
Can you use the mic, please, Mulli? Vedant, please. Vedant, fast.
Sir, my question is not particularly to any one of you, but on the whole, when it comes to management education, there is a lot of emphasis on structure, and we come up with frameworks for everything. But when it comes to in terms of administration, government governance, policy, is there any emphasis, a lot of focus on coming up with frameworks or structure? Is there anything like that, or else because when you come to dealing with actual people on the ground, there is not we can't see a lot of structure over there. So how different it is when compared to management education and real-time administrations?
Rest assured, I did not plan this question much as I actually wanted them to ask this question.
I will just briefly answer this. Basically, in administration and especially in field, sometimes things are spontaneous because you have to react instantly. But at the same time, the term that you use, framework, in terms of management, in terms of administration, it would be procedure. So we have our set pattern, set procedures. Sometimes these procedures may serve the purpose, sometimes they may defeat the purpose. So that is where human intelligence, not artificial intelligence, human intelligence is very important, because ultimately we have to align our actions along with the objectives for which these procedures have been made, rather than focusing totally upon the procedure or the framework. So they are helpful, they give you a kind of checklist that, okay, have you done all these things? And then you can decide, okay, these are not necessary, these are not required.
Wonderful. Well, we'll stay with this question, sir. So, I request all of you to answer this question.
एक ब्यूरोक्रेटिक सिस्टम या एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सिस्टम आज की तारीख में एक बहुत ही ओल्ड सिस्टम है, एंड देयर इज अ सिस्टम इन्वॉल्व्ड. इट इज नॉट दैट देयर इज नो सिस्टम, देयर इज अ सिस्टम, बट बिकॉज ऑफ अर्जेंट इश्यूज या फिर कोई भी अचानक हमारे पे आपदा आती है, तब हमारी वो आपदा मेंटेन भी इसलिए हो पाती है बिकॉज देयर इज अ सिस्टम. बट कुछ हमारे ऊपर कंटिंजेंट आया है तो उसकी वजह से थोड़ी हाहाकार मचती है. तो मुझे कभी भी नहीं लगता है कि गवर्नमेंट सिस्टम में या एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सिस्टम में एक स्ट्रक्चर या फ्रेमवर्क एग्जिस्ट नहीं कर रहा है. रादर आज की तारीख में हम लोग जितने भी इनोवेशंस लाते हैं या जितनी भी चीज़ें हम सोच पाते हैं, we realize after developing them that it already existed in the system. And अगर हम उसी को रिव्यू या फिर उसी को रिविजिट कर लेते तो probably हमें इस इनोवेशन की ज़रूरत ना पड़ती. It is true that some things are to be tweaked a little. कुछ चीज़ें ऐसी हैं जो आर्काइव हो गई हैं तो उनको बेहतर करने की ज़रूरत है. बट मुझे कभी भी नहीं लगता है कि एक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सिस्टम में एक कंप्लीट स्ट्रक्चर फ्रेमवर्क एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता है. देयर इज अ वेरी वेल फ्रेम्ड, वेरी लेड आउट स्ट्रक्चर इन्वॉल्व्ड ऑलरेडी. बस ये है कि क्योंकि हमारे इश्यूज जो है वो बहुत न्यू है, लाइक देयर विल बी अ न्यू स्कीम लॉन्च एवरी मंथ, ठीक है, तो उसको आपको एग्जीक्यूट करना है एंड वो विद इन अ मंथ वो सैचुरेट करना है, सारे बेनिफिशियरीज को मनी ट्रांसफर होना है. तो इमरजेंसी ऐसी आती है कि आपका सिस्टम एग्जिस्ट करता है, इसीलिए वो 2-3 महीने में हो पाता है. दैट इज ट्रू कि हम लोग उसको जिस तरीके से करते हैं उसमें ऐसा लगता है कि कुछ एग्जिस्ट नहीं कर रहा है और बस आज ही सब कुछ फ्रेम हुआ और आज ही ये काम हुआ. यस, और जैसे कोविड जैसे इश्यूज आते हैं उनमें सिस्टम स्ट्रक्चर एग्जिस्ट नहीं कर रहे थे, बट देयर इज अ होल गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट, देयर इज अ फ्रेमवर्क, देयर इज एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. उसमें किस तरीके से उसको रीसेट करना है, हमें सिर्फ उतनी ही ट्वीकिंग करनी पड़ी. अदरवाइज पूरी डाउन द लाइन पूरा सिस्टम टिल विलेज लेवल, फ्रॉम द सेक्रेटेरिएट लेवल और प्रोबेबली फ्रॉम द कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी लेवल वो एग्जिस्ट करता है.
Anything that you would like to share, Ms. Choudhary and Ms. Satabdi Mazumdar, and of course.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I agree completely with Ananya sir कि systems exist तो करते ही हैं, चाहे वो सस्पेंडेड एनिमेशन में हो, अभी एक्टिवेटेड ना हो, बट वो एग्जिस्ट करते हैं. जब कोविड आया तो एक एपिडेमिक्स एक्ट एग्जिस्ट करता था जब कभी वो पूना के प्लेग के समय या उसके पहले बना था. वो एपिडेमिक्स एक्ट था, कहीं कोने में पड़ा हुआ था, बट वो एग्जिस्ट करता था. अनदर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग, ये थोड़ा सा अगेन लोडेड स्टेटमेंट है, मुझे पर्सनली ऐसा लगता है आफ्टर वर्किंग एट द ग्राउंड लेवल बहुत सारे जगहों पे कि समहाउ रूरल इंडिया इज फार मोर अवेयर ऑफ हाउ गवर्नेंस वर्क्स देन अर्बन इंडिया. अगर मैं गांव में जाऊं, हर आदमी को पता है कि अगर सरकार की 30 स्कीम चलती है तो वो किसके किसके लिए एलिजिबल है, किस किस के लिए एलिजिबल नहीं है, उसका नाम प्रधानमंत्री आवास से किसने बदमाशी करके वहाँ से हटा दिया या किस पंचायत सचिव ने हटा दिया, उनको वोकैबुलरी पता है पूरे रेवेन्यू एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की, जो कि पर्शियन में है, फारसी में है, कुछ अरबिक वर्ड्स है जो हमें सीखने पड़ते हैं। गांव का बच्चा को पता है कि खतियान में क्या है, 32 के खतियान में क्या था, कैसे फैमिली का डिवीजन हुआ। सक्सेशन एक्ट आपको लॉयर से ज़्यादा अच्छा पढ़ा सकते हैं कि किसको कितना हिस्सा मिलना चाहिए। तो इलेक्शन में बोलते हैं अर्बन एपिथी, अर्बन एरिया वोट नहीं करती है, वोटिंग परसेंटेजेस इन अर्बन एरिया इज अबिसमली कंपेयर टू रूरल एरिया। ये मुझे गवर्नेंस में भी दिखता है, देयर इज अर्बन एपिथी। अर्बन एरिया इज नॉट कंसर्न विद गवर्नेंस, थोड़ा कुकून में चला गया है वो, उनको ऐसा लगता है शायद कि वर्ड ऑफ गवर्नेंस उनको इम्पैक्ट नहीं करता है, बट ऐसी बात है नहीं, वो सबको इक्वली इम्पैक्ट करता है। तो वो सिस्टम जितना इंट्रेंच रूरल एरिया में है उतना अर्बन एरिया में इंट्रेंच नहीं है। थैंक यू।
Yes, ma'am, your thought on the question.
So nothing new to add, just that as administrators we don't start off with structures and frameworks probably, but there is an ingrained element of institutions, structures and frameworks in whatever actions we take. For example, कहीं भी कोई developmental project ही हमें चालू करवाना है या there is a campaign that we want to kick off, we certainly weigh कौन से location पे इसको start करना बेहतर होगा, ज़्यादा fruitful कहाँ पे होगा। So that is nothing but a SWOT analysis, that is a structure and framework, right? So wait, thank you.
Yes, over to you.
So just to add to what Ravi sir said, governance in any case has two parts. There is one part of policy making and the other part is execution. So as sir said, in execution, procedures are more important. When everything is laid down procedurally, how to execute, how not to execute. And public administration, particularly in policy making, there are existing frameworks as well. For example, some of you might have heard of isomorphic mimicry. There is information asymmetry. And there are frameworks to analyze the different problems that the policy making part or even the execution part is facing. So it's not like the terms that are present in the management education, they are very new to the what exists in the governance as well.
Logging back to you one more time. Yes, please. Anybody have any question? Next question, please.
Good evening, panelists. I have a question that is located for Jharkhand residents. In past few years, we found that many industries shift from Jamshedpur to some other location, either in Pune or Gujarat area. Tata Cummins has already shipped one plant. Tata Hitachi has shipped. And we lost one AIMS also that supposed to get in Jharkhand. So it is the default of our lethargic bureaucracy policy or something else like unstructured government policy. It is really painful for a resident for Jharkhand. We are losing the source of income. Still we are making so much policy where government is losing the money unnecessary. But we are instead of focusing on source of income, we are debating our source to some other resources. We need some clarity from your side because you have seen government bureaucracy from minor view from the last many years.
Mention your name and who is this question directed at?
Sorry sir, my name is Roshan and I am from PGDM there.
And who do you want this question to answer?
Ravi sir will go.
Okay.
I personally feel that I may need some support from my colleagues, but I will venture my attempt. See, first of all, the bureaucracy is not different from the society. The bureaucracy is also a part of the society. Means merely because I am sitting on this side of the dais, you are sitting there, it doesn't mean that we are different. It's just that the rule has changed for the time being. So first of all, we need to understand in terms of investment and industries, the kind of political economy that we have in our state, coupled with its history, which has resulted into two very important and at the same time kind of stifling revenue laws, the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act and the Santhal Parna Tenancy Act. Now, the objective behind these legislations was to protect the interests of the local public. Again, we can go back to the debate between economic growth and the rights or the quality of life, where the indigenous rights will also come into picture. But without going that deep, that far, it's again a manifestation of how the society reacts, how the society represents to these demands, and at the same time, the demands with respect to conservation and the demands which is contradictory in terms of change or development for that matter. So the state has definitely some very good policies, and there have been some very good initiatives to promote investment. There was a time, and even now we are not doing that bad in terms of ease of doing business. We are one among the best 5 in the entire country, and there was a time when we were at the first position. So, I mean, it's not the lack of willpower or lack of opportunity. It's more about having that kind of capability and having that kind of supporting environment. But at the same time, as you pointed out this question, means this has to be reflected through the will of the society, and that is where maybe the time to come when it is reflected through the true will of the society, reflected or manifested by the political will as well, where the bureaucracy has the job of implementing it. We are not in the role of policy formulation per se directly. We can guide it, kind of give some suggestions, but the ultimate decision has to be taken by the political executive, which again represents the will of the people, to which all of us are in a way similarly and likely accountable. So that was from my side, but I think my able colleagues can add something more valuable, and maybe they can answer it in even better manner.
Yes, please, if you want to add something. Yes, please, go ahead, Mr. Choudhary.
थैंक यू सर. एक हमारे सर्विस में बहुत सीनियर ऑफिसर थे अनिल स्वरूप जी, उन्होंने कई सारी किताबें भी लिखी हैं, एंड एक पब्लिक पॉलिसी में कॉन्सेप्ट आता है जिसको उन्होंने अपनी किताब में, आई थिंक अपनी कुछ स्पीचेस में भी क्रिस्टलाइज करके लिखा था कि पॉलिसी आइडिया सबके पास है. मेरे पास भी हर दिन 1-2 पॉलिसी आइडिया आ जाते हैं गाँव में घूमते घूमते पंचायत में कि ऐसा नहीं ऐसा होना चाहिए. आपके पास भी है कि इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट क्यों नहीं हो रहा है. But for every policy idea, it's very simplified. To be successful, एक 6x6 matrix में उसको fit बैठना पड़ता है. वो मैंने अभी Google करके निकाला है. It should be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable and judicially tenable. तो अब मैं सोच लेता हूँ कि क्यों नहीं हम ये सारा लैंड एक्वायर करके किसी इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट को दे देते हैं. ये सोशली डिजायरेबल नहीं होगा, पॉलिटिकली फीजिबल तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं होगा, और मोस्ट लाइकली जुडिशली टेनेबल भी नहीं होगा. तो जब आपके पास कोई ब्रिलियंट पॉलिसी आइडिया आए तो इस 6x6 मैट्रिक्स में एक बार उसको एनालाइज करके देखिए. मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम आपका टेक्नोलॉजिकली फीजिबल निकल जाएगा, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिवली भी डूएबल निकल जाएगा, फेल करेगा पॉलिटिकली डिजायरेबल पे. अगर आपको लगता है कि कोई स्कीम जिसमें हम लेट्स से बहुत पॉपुलर स्कीम है, हम लोगों को कुछ फ्रीबीज दे रहे हैं, आपको लगता है कि इट इज अ बैड पॉलिसी बट इट विल फिट इन ऑल ऑफ इट इज technically desirable, technically doable, administratively doable, it is politically feasible, सारे politicians चाहते हैं, it is socially very desirable, सबको पैसा चाहिए भी, और it is judicially tenable. तो वो पॉलिसी भले ही आपको शायद अटपटी लगे बट ये 6x6 मैट्रिक्स में एग्जैक्टली बैठ जाएगी. तो जब भी कोई ऐसा ब्रिलियंट आइडिया मेरे माइंड में आता है, मैं एक बार जरूर सोचता हूँ कि कहाँ फेल करने वाला है ये, और ये पक्का कहीं ना कहीं जरूर फेल करता है. थैंक यू.
I think you want to add
very well articulated by Dipankar. I think कि हम लोग के लिए भी learning है कि probably we were doing all this but हमारे पास ये SOP नहीं थी, so without knowing about it. Also मतलब मैं भी अब इसके बारे में अगर और सोचूं तो I think कुछ policies हमारे level पे होती हैं जो हमें implement करनी होती है, जो 6x6 में नहीं fit होगी but वो required होती है, और that will do good to the district or the state or the nation. उसको कैसे करना है, that is the task. वो थोड़ा सा हम लोगों के लिए challenging रहता है. And I think according to the time, by influencing, by talking about it, by discussing, by making it एक उसका context create करके उसको important, relevant बना के शायद हम उस 6x6 में उसको fit कर सकते हैं. But yes, it is time taking. तो probably 6x6 की अगर कोई योजना नहीं है तो उसमें टाइम का एक फैक्टर ऐड करके प्रॉब्ली कुछ और स्कीम्स उसमें ऐड करी जा सकती हैं, 6x6 बनाई जा सकती हैं. This is what I still feel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Marcia is actually.
I will just slightly deviate from the question, and I will try to take you all of you back once again towards Taleb. So Taleb has written a book, The Bed of Protests. तो पॉलिसी मेकिंग में क्या होता है और स्पेशली इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में क्या होता है कि प्रोटेस्ट का किस्सा पता है आप लोगों को, किसी को कितने लोगों को पता है ये बेड ऑफ प्रोटेस्ट के बारे में? किसी को नहीं? तो देन इट विल बी इंटरेस्टिंग. प्रोटेस्ट बेसिकली एथेंस से एक दूसरे आइलैंड के लिए जाने के लिए जो रास्ता होता था उसमें एक माउंटेन पे रहता था, और जब भी कोई काफ़ी सेक्रेट रूट होता था तो whenever someone is going through that route, he will stop them, tell them that please accept my hospitality, stay at my place for one night, and then he had a bed, and he will let his guests sleep on the bed, and he had this habit of either stretching them so that they can fit into the bed, it was an iron bed, or amputating their limbs so that they can fit into the bed. Some people say that he had two kinds of beds, one for the longer person, one for the shorter person. So the essence and the correlation with the policy making and policy implementation of Protestantian bed is that sometimes we all also have this 6x6 kind of Protestantian bed where we try to fit all the problems into these premeditated solutions, and then you know what can happen. Means the problem will not survive, but then it will be a very brutal way.
Thank you, sir. Much as we would like to have your thoughts, we'll go to the last question for I've been signaled with the time. So who has the last question before we wrap up?
The one who has the mic. Okay. Sorry. No. So my exposure to administrative was starting with the work that I started working with Visa. So and that was exactly during COVID, right? So like Winston Churchill says, never let a good crisis go waste, right? So that was a time when I really saw upfront officials from across different departments seamlessly engaging, connecting with each other and solving a larger problem, right? There are people from education to water supply, everybody coming together and doing something, and obviously magic happened and we were able to do a lot of things. But we still needed that, and my question is, I have been able to continue that opportunity and continue to keep that connection forward after that whole thing happened, or are we going back to our normal jobs? And there was a certain real synergy that I saw, and I'm just asking if that is something that will go back, or we need another crisis for us to come back to it. Anybody?
Well, crisis will definitely see the kind of response that is required to address the crisis. So that may be different, but then once you have reached to a certain level of synergy, then it doesn't require a crisis to sustain that synergy. Means basically, the larger purpose can be achieved even without the crisis. Crisis may be an opportunity, but then it doesn't mean that we always need a crisis to come close or to work together. Once the walls are broken, there should not be any stopping or any stumbling on the way.
I personally feel that we are constantly living from crisis to crisis. For example, even now, in which most of us might be feeling that we are not living in a crisis, we have crisis of air pollution, we have crisis of depleting groundwater. So I think this synergy that you rightly said was present in COVID, that if it doesn't exist, that is needed right now. Because it's not like we have right now, we don't have any particular sort of crisis that is facing us. It's just that its impact is slow to come. That's why we don't recognize it as a particular crisis.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we've come to the end of this proceedings. It was wonderful having you talk about all these elements, starting with Satabdi ma'am. You talked about planning with people, not for people, and Mr. Choudhary, you talked about so many things on stakeholder management. You gave us a new formula, the 6x6 matrix. really wonderful. I mean, we talked about really stakeholders because much as I was asking you the question, how to tackle the elephant in the room, how do you manage? But I think we'll have that conversation some other time. And of course, our own very honorable DC, Shri Ananya Mittal, being very frank with telling us the SOPs are end of the day sacred and very important. And Shri Ravi Shankar Shukla, as usual, philosophical answers to the questions which we need philosophical answers, of course, because that's where a leader has to become a philosopher. And we don't really cross the river twice, as Heraclitus said. I remember we don't cross anything twice, any air we don't smell twice in our life. So that's extremely important. Change management, coming back to Shri Aniket, you mentioned about being prepared for change all the time, force majeure, you mentioned that, and that really is ringing true in my heart. And it is wonderful talking to you. And I would go back to my favorite Cicero, the Roman philosopher and lawyer, said the greatest virtue for mankind is gratitude. And I'm filled with gratitude on behalf of XLRI, on behalf of all my students, to all of you for taking time out, valuable time. I know the terrain of time for all of you, your phones ringing, and I'm sure in some corner of this state, people are trying to reach out to you. And nevertheless, you really stayed steadfast to your commitment and be here with us. We're extremely honored and privileged to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a tribute to Professor Sarangi, being from English literature, I can't stop myself from quoting something from Herman Melville, Moby Dick, faith, and this is particularly addressed to the new generation, and we also feel ourselves a part of that. When you look towards the state of affairs, faith is like a jackal, and it feeds among the dead, among the tombs, and gathers its most vital hope even from these dead doubts.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
We thank the panelists for their insightful perspectives. The experience serves as a guiding panel for even us as MBA students for our future endeavors. The administrative work that they do and the insights that we got can be applied in our professional career and can also make us sensitive to the issues that arise at every day. Thank you so much, sir. I now call upon Father Dorothy Silva to please present the mementos to our esteemed. I would like to call upon
Because we capture the photos.
Ravi Shankar Shukla.
Yes, yes.
Next up, we have Mr. Ananya Mittal. Next up, we have Mr. Dipankar Choudhary. Next up, we have Mr. Aniket Sachan. And next, we have Ms. Satabdi Mazumdar.